The summer heat pressed down on the streets of London as tourists flooded the area around Buckingham Palace. Among the crowd was 15-year-old Marcus Chen, visiting from California with his wealthy family. His designer sneakers cost more than most people's monthly rent, and his attitude matched the price tag. Marcus had grown up getting everything he wanted, and today would be no different, or so he thought. Marcus stood with his phone raised, filming the stoic royal guard who stood motionless in his bright red uniform and tall bearskin hat. The guard's face remained expressionless, eyes fixed straight ahead, completely ignoring the hundreds of tourists snapping photos around him. To Marcus, this was boring content. His social media followers expected something viral, something that would get millions of views. This is stupid, Marcus muttered to his younger sister Emily, who stood quietly beside him. He's just standing there like a statue. Watch this. Before Emily could stop him, Marcus stepped closer to the guard, crossing the clearly marked boundary line. He waved his hand in front of the guard's face, trying to get a reaction. Nothing. The guard remained perfectly still, his discipline evident in every muscle. Marcus's friends back home had dared him to make a royal guard break character, and he wasn't about to fail. "Hey, robot man, can you even hear me?" Marcus said loudly, drawing attention from other tourists. Some people frowned at his behavior, while others pulled out their phones to record what was happening. Emily tugged at her brother's sleeve, whispering for him to stop, but Marcus shrugged her off. An older gentleman nearby, dressed in a simple gray suit, watched the scene unfold. His name was Thomas Whitmore, though nobody in the crowd knew that. He had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, and he carried himself with quiet dignity. Thomas had seen many tourists behave disrespectfully over the years, but something about this young man's arrogance troubled him more than usual. Marcus continued his antics, now making faces at the guard and speaking in a mocking British accent. "Cheerio, mate. Would you like some tea?" He laughed at his own joke, but most of the crowd remained silent, watching with disapproval. The guard, whose name was James Sullivan, maintained his position. Inside, James felt the familiar frustration that came with these situations. He had served in Afghanistan, had been trained to face genuine threats, and now he had to stand perfectly still, while a spoiled teenager tried to humiliate him for internet points. Emily finally found her voice. "Marcus, please stop. You're embarrassing us. Mom and Dad would be so angry if they saw this." "Mom and Dad aren't here," Marcus snapped back. "They're too busy looking at boring paintings in some museum. Besides, what's he going to do? He can't move. He can't do anything. He's basically a toy soldier." Thomas Whitmore stepped forward slowly. His movements were measured and his expression remained gentle. "Young man," he said in a soft but clear voice, "perhaps you might show a bit of respect. These guards have served our country with honor." Marcus spun around, sizing up the older man. He saw someone he assumed was just another tourist, probably jealous that he didn't have the courage to do what Marcus was doing. "And who are you supposed to be?" "His grandfather." "Mind your own business, old man." The crowd gasped at Marcus's rudeness, but Thomas simply smiled. "I'm just someone who understands the value of respect and discipline. Two things that might serve you well to learn." "Whatever," Marcus said, turning back to the guard. He pulled out a bag of chips from his backpack and began eating them, intentionally dropping crumbs near the guard's perfectly polished boots. "Oops, my bad." James Sullivan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he maintained his stance. Years of training kept him rooted in place, even as anger simmered beneath his professional exterior. He thought about his younger brother, who had behavioral issues and reminded him somewhat of this arrogant tourist. The difference was his brother was learning to be better. This young man seemed determined to be worse. A police officer approached, having noticed the disturbance. "Step back behind the line, please," she said firmly to Marcus. Marcus rolled his eyes but took a single step backward, still standing far too close. "Happy now? I'm behind the precious line." "Further back, please," the officer insisted. "This is ridiculous," Marcus complained, but he moved back a few more feet. However, the moment the officer turned to manage another part of the crowd, Marcus crept forward again. He had a new idea that he thought would be hilarious. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a stuffed animal, a ridiculous-looking monkey with a crown on its head that he'd bought from a street vendor earlier. "Hey, guard, I brought you a friend," Marcus said, attempting to place the toy near the guard's feet. But as he leaned forward, he accidentally knocked against one of the barriers, causing it to shift. The sudden movement startled a nearby horse, part of the mounted guard unit that patrolled the area. The horse reared up slightly, and its rider, another royal guard, had to quickly control the animal. Marcus stumbled backward, dropping his phone in the process. The screen cracked as it hit the pavement. For the first time that afternoon, Marcus's confident smirk disappeared. "Now look what you've done," he shouted as if the broken phone was somehow the guard's fault. "That phone cost $2,000. Thomas Whitmore bent down and picked up the phone, examining the damage. "Expensive toys break easily when handled carelessly," he observed, handing it back to Marcus. "Much like respect. Once broken, it's difficult to repair." Marcus snatched the phone from Thomas's hand. "You don't know anything about me." "Perhaps not," Thomas agreed. "But I know what I see. A young man who has perhaps had things too easy, who has never learned that actions have consequences, and who believes that money and bravado can replace character." Emily spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "He's right, Marcus. Can we please just go? I want to see the rest of London without you getting us in trouble." Marcus looked at his sister, then at the crowd of people staring at him with various expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. For a brief moment, something flickered across his face, perhaps the beginning of shame, but he pushed it down quickly. He couldn't let these strangers see him back down. "Fine," he said. "This was boring anyway. These guards are nothing special. Just people in costumes standing around doing nothing important." As Marcus turned to leave, Thomas called out once more. "Young man, before you go, might I ask your name?" Marcus paused, suspicious. "Why do you want to know?" "Just curious about a fellow traveler," Thomas said with that same gentle smile. "Marcus Chen," he said, puffing out his chest slightly, still trying to maintain his tough image. "And before you ask, yes, my dad is Richard Chen. Maybe you've heard of him. He runs one of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Well, Marcus Chen, I hope the rest of your visit to London teaches you more than this afternoon has." Marcus scoffed and walked away, Emily hurrying to keep up with him. As they disappeared into the crowd, James Sullivan finally allowed himself the smallest exhale of relief. Another encounter survived with his professionalism intact, though this one had tested him more than most. Thomas Whitmore remained standing there for a moment longer, watching the spot where Marcus had vanished. He pulled out his own phone and made a brief call, speaking in low tones that no one nearby could hear. When he finished, he looked once more at Guard Sullivan, giving him a slight nod of respect that the guard subtly acknowledged before returning his gaze to the distance. The afternoon continued with its usual rhythm of tourists and photographs, but something had been set in motion. Marcus Chen had no idea that his arrogant display had been witnessed by someone far more significant than a random old man in a gray suit, and the consequences of his actions were about to unfold in ways he could never have imagined. Marcus and Emily returned to their luxury hotel suite at the Savoy, one of London's most prestigious hotels. The room overlooked the Thames River, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering city skyline. Marcus threw himself onto the leather couch, still fuming about his broken phone. He had immediately ordered a replacement online, but it wouldn't arrive until tomorrow. For someone who documented every moment of his life on social media, being phoneless felt like losing a limb. Emily sat on the opposite side of the room, quiet and withdrawn. The afternoon had left her feeling uncomfortable. She loved her brother, but lately he had been getting worse. Every privilege their parents gave him seemed to make him more entitled rather than grateful. She wondered if she should tell their parents what happened, but she knew Marcus would deny everything or twist the story to make himself look innocent. Their mother, Linda Chen, arrived first, carrying shopping bags from Harrods. She was an elegant woman in her late 40s, always impeccably dressed and polished. "Hello, darlings. Did you have a wonderful afternoon?" she asked, setting down her purchases. "It was fine," Emily said quickly before Marcus could speak. "Fine? Just fine?" Linda looked disappointed. "You were at Buckingham Palace. Didn't you find it magnificent?" Marcus barely looked up from his cracked phone screen. "It was boring. Just some guards standing around pretending to be important." Linda frowned slightly but didn't press further. She had learned over the years that Marcus went through moods, and it was often easier to let him work through them himself. She busied herself showing Emily the beautiful scarf she had bought her, while Marcus scrolled through his social media feeds. An hour later, Richard Chen entered the suite. He was a tall, imposing man with sharp features and an air of authority that came from building a billion-dollar company from nothing. Unlike his wife, Richard had grown up poor and worked his way up through sheer determination and brilliance. He had wanted to give his children everything he never had, but somewhere along the way he worried he had given them too much. "Family dinner in 30 minutes, Richard announced. "Wear something nice. We have reservations at restaurant Gordon Ramsay." Marcus perked up at this. "The Gordon Ramsay? The one with 3 Michelin stars?" "The very same," Richard confirmed. "I had to pull some strings to get us in tonight." The family dressed and made their way to the famous restaurant in Chelsea. The dining room was intimate and elegant with soft lighting and impeccable service. A waiter guided them to their table, and menus were presented with the kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred texts. Each dish was a work of art, carefully crafted and beautifully presented. As they ate, Richard discussed business. Linda talked about her shopping discoveries, and Emily listened quietly. Marcus interrupted occasionally with comments about influencers he followed or videos he wanted to make. Nobody mentioned the incident at Buckingham Palace, and Marcus began to relax, assuming his behavior had no consequences beyond a broken phone screen. They were halfway through the main course when Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and excused himself from the table. Linda continued eating, accustomed to her husband's business calls at all hours. But when Richard returned 5 minutes later, his expression was different. Darker, more serious. "Marcus," Richard said, his voice controlled but tight. "We need to talk about your afternoon." Marcus's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" "I just received a very interesting phone call," Richard continued, setting his phone on the table. "Would you like to tell me what happened at Buckingham Palace today?" Emily's eyes widened. She looked at her brother, wondering if he would finally tell the truth. "Nothing happened," Marcus said defensively. "We just watched the guards and took some pictures." "It was boring. Nothing happened," Richard repeated. "So you didn't harass a royal guard? You didn't cross security boundaries? You didn't disrespect a gentleman who tried to speak with you?" The color drained from Marcus's face. "Who called you? How do you even know about that?" Linda put down her wineglass. "Richard, what's going on?" Richard kept his eyes fixed on his son. "The gentleman you were rude to this afternoon was Thomas Whitmore. Does that name mean anything to you?" Marcus shook his head, confused. Emily looked equally puzzled. "Thomas Whitmore is the Duke of Lancaster," Richard said slowly, letting each word sink in. "He's a member of the British royal family. And you called him old man and told him to mind his own business." The revelation hit the table like a bomb. Linda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Emily's eyes went impossibly wide. Marcus felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath him. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "He was just some random old guy. He wasn't wearing anything fancy. He didn't have guards or anything. That's because he often walks among regular people without fanfare," Richard explained, his voice hard. "He's known for his humble approach to public service. And apparently, he was at Buckingham Palace today observing his guards when you decided to use one of them for your entertainment." Marcus struggled to find words. His mind raced back to the afternoon, to the quiet man in the gray suit who had spoken so gently to him. A duke, an actual member of the royal family, and he had been incredibly rude to him. "How did he get your number?" Marcus finally asked. "We've done business together," Richard said. "His family trust invested in my company 5 years ago. We're not friends, but we're professional associates. He called as a courtesy, father to father, to let me know what happened. He didn't have to do that. He could have let it become a public incident or involve the police more seriously." Linda looked at Marcus with disappointment written across her face. "Marcus, how could you?" "What were you thinking?" "I didn't know," Marcus protested. "If I had known who he was, That's the problem," Richard interrupted sharply. "You should treat everyone with respect, not just people with titles or money or power. The fact that you would only show respect if you knew someone was important shows exactly what's wrong with your attitude." The table fell silent. Other diners glanced over, sensing the tension but unable to hear the conversation. Marcus felt shame burning through him, a feeling he wasn't accustomed to experiencing. He had always been able to charm or buy his way out of trouble before. "What did he say?" Marcus asked quietly. "Is he going to press charges or something?" Richard sighed. "He said that you reminded him of his nephew." who also struggled with entitlement issues when he was younger. The Duke said he hopes this might be a learning experience for you. He's not seeking any action against you, but he wanted me to know what kind of behavior my son was displaying abroad. Emily found her courage. Dad, it was really bad. Marcus was awful to the guard, too. He dropped food near his boots and tried to make him break character. Everyone was staring at us. Marcus shot his sister a betrayed look, but he couldn't deny her words. Richard closed his eyes briefly, composing himself. When we return to the hotel, you will write a formal apology letter to both the Duke and the guard you harassed. I will personally deliver it through proper channels. You will also forfeit your new phone when it arrives. You'll use a basic model without internet access for the next 3 months. 3 months? Marcus protested. Dad, that's crazy. How are you supposed to what? Richard challenged. Live without documenting every moment? Function without constant validation from strangers online? Maybe that's exactly what you need to learn, Linda added. And we're cutting your allowance in half. The money you would have received will be donated to military charities that support veterans and active service members. People like the guard you disrespected today who have sacrificed far more than you can imagine. Marcus felt his world crumbling. His phone, his allowance, his social media presence, all of it being stripped away. But deeper than the anger or frustration was something else. Genuine shame. The realization that he had behaved terribly and that his actions had reached far beyond what he imagined possible. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely audible. Don't apologize to us, Richard said. Apologize to the people you wronged. And more importantly, show through your actions that you're sorry. Words mean nothing without changed behavior. The remainder of the dinner was eaten in uncomfortable silence. The exquisite food tasted like ash in Marcus's mouth. He kept replaying the afternoon in his mind, seeing it now through different eyes. The way Thomas Whitmore had spoken to him with such patience and wisdom. The way the guard had maintained his dignity, despite Marcus's attempts to humiliate him. The way his sister had begged him to stop, and he had ignored her. When they returned to the hotel, Marcus sat at the elegant writing desk in his room, staring at the blank paper before him. How did you apologize for such behavior? What words could possibly express the regret he now felt? He picked up the pen, his hand trembling slightly, and began to write. Outside his window, London sparkled with lights, beautiful and indifferent to the lessons being learned in one hotel room. Marcus Chen had come to this city expecting adventure and excitement. Instead, he had found something more valuable and far more uncomfortable. He had found a mirror that reflected exactly who he had become, and he didn't like what he saw. The question was whether he had the courage to become someone better. Marcus stared at the blank paper for what felt like hours. He had written dozens of captions for social media posts, thousands of text messages, and countless emails. But nothing had ever felt as difficult as this apology letter. Every sentence he started felt inadequate or insincere. He crumpled up his fourth attempt and threw it across the room in frustration. Emily knocked softly on his door and entered without waiting for permission. She carried 2 cups of hot chocolate from the hotel's room service. Thought you might need this, she said, setting one on his desk. Marcus looked at his younger sister, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in months. She was 13, still finding her way in the world, and he realized he had been a terrible role model. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For today? For embarrassing you? Emily sat on the edge of his bed. I'm not the one who needs to hear that. I know, Marcus replied. I just don't know what to say to them. How do I apologize to a duke? What do I even call him? Your Royal Highness? Your Grace. Maybe just be honest, Emily suggested. Tell him what you told me. That you're sorry and you were wrong. Marcus nodded slowly and picked up his pen again. This time the words came more easily. He wrote about his shame, his recognition that his behavior was unacceptable, and his understanding that every person deserves respect, regardless of their title or position. He wrote about how he had been given so much in life but had failed to appreciate it, or use his privileges responsibly. When he finished, the letter was 2 full pages and his hand ached from writing. The letter to guard James Sullivan was shorter but no less heartfelt. Marcus apologized for treating him like an object rather than a person, for disrespecting his service and sacrifice, and for his childish behavior. He promised to do better, though he wasn't sure what that meant yet. By the time he finished both letters, it was past midnight. Marcus crawled into bed exhausted, both physically and emotionally. He dreamed of standing at attention like a guard while people mocked him, and he understood for the first time what he had put that soldier through. The next morning, the family had a subdued breakfast in their suite. Richard had arranged to have the letters delivered through official channels, using his business connections to ensure they reached the proper recipients. Linda seemed disappointed but not entirely surprised by Marcus's behavior, which somehow made it worse. She had seen the warning signs and hadn't addressed them strongly enough. "I've made some changes to our itinerary," Richard announced as they finished eating. "Instead of the shopping and tourist activities we planned, I've arranged for a different kind of education." Marcus looked up nervously. "What kind of education?" "You'll see," Richard said. "Get dressed. We're leaving in an hour." They took a private car out of central London, driving for nearly 2 hours into the countryside. The landscape changed from urban sprawl to rolling green hills and ancient forests. Finally, they arrived at a large estate surrounded by stone walls. A discreet sign read Headley Court Rehabilitation Center. "This is a facility that helps injured military personnel recover and rehabilitate," Richard explained as they parked. "I made some donations here years ago, and I've arranged for us to have a tour. I want you to see what real service looks like, Marcus. What sacrifice means." They were met at the entrance by a woman in her 50s named Sarah Mitchell, the facility's director. She had kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor. "Welcome, Mr. Chen. We're grateful for your continued support." She glanced at Marcus and Emily. "And these must be your children." Sarah led them through the facility, explaining its purpose and programs. They saw physical therapy rooms where men and women worked to regain mobility after devastating injuries. They visited the prosthetics department where advanced artificial limbs were fitted and adjusted. They met soldiers who had lost arms, legs, and in some cases, multiple limbs in service to their country. In one therapy room, a young man not much older than Marcus was learning to walk again with a prosthetic leg. His name was David Harrison, and he was 22 years old. He had stepped on an improvised explosive device in Syria while trying to help evacuate civilians from a conflict zone. The blast had taken his left leg below the knee and damaged his right leg severely. "This is my 5th week here," David explained, his face showing both determination and exhaustion. "Some days are better than others, but I'm lucky. I'm alive. 3 of my unit members didn't make it home." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. Here was someone barely older than himself who had given so much, while Marcus had given nothing and complained about everything. "How do you stay positive?" Marcus asked quietly. David smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "I don't always. Some days I'm angry at the world, but I remind myself that I chose this path. I wanted to serve, and serving means sacrifice. Not everyone understands that, but the people who matter do." Sarah led them next to a common area where several veterans were gathered, some in wheelchairs, others with visible scars. They were laughing together, sharing stories and supporting each other. One man in his 30s with burn scars covering half his face was showing pictures of his newborn daughter to his friends. "That's Michael Torres," Sarah said softly. "He pulled 4 people from a burning vehicle before the fuel tank exploded. He saved those lives but paid a heavy price. Yet he considers himself blessed because he survived and got to meet his daughter." Emily was crying quietly, and even Richard's usually controlled expression showed emotion. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was witnessing. These people had given everything for others, and he had mocked someone who stood as a symbol of that service. Their final stop was an outdoor area where several veterans were tending a memorial garden. Each plant represented a fallen service member, and the veterans maintained it with obvious love and reverence. Among them was an older man in his 60s, moving slowly but purposefully. When he turned around, Marcus's heart stopped. It was Thomas Whitmore, the Duke of Lancaster, dressed in simple work clothes and gardening gloves, pruning roses alongside the veterans. Sarah smiled. "Ah, the Duke volunteers here every Thursday. He served in the military himself years ago and never forgot his brothers and sisters in arms." Thomas looked up and saw the Chen family. If he was surprised, he didn't show it. Instead, he simply nodded in greeting and continued his work. Richard approached him, and they spoke in low tones while Marcus stood frozen, unsure what to do. Finally, Thomas walked over to Marcus, still holding his pruning shears. Up close, Marcus could see old scars on the Duke's hands and a slight limp in his walk. This man had his own story of service and sacrifice. "Hello again, young man," Thomas said gently. "Your Grace," Marcus stammered, then cleared his throat. "I wrote you a letter, an apology. But seeing you here, seeing all of this, I realize how inadequate words are." Thomas set down his tools and gestured to a nearby bench. They sat together while the others gave them space. "Words are a beginning," Thomas said. "But yes, actions matter more. Tell me, what have you learned?" Marcus struggled to articulate the storm of emotions inside him. "I thought I understood the world," he began slowly. "I thought that money and status meant something. I thought people were impressive because of what they had or what they looked like. But I was completely wrong." He gestured to the garden around them. "These people, they're heroes. Real heroes. Not like the influencers I follow online or the celebrities I admire. They gave up so much for others, and I didn't even give them basic respect." Thomas listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. "I've been so focused on getting attention, on being seen, on having the best of everything," Marcus continued. "But what have I actually done? What have I contributed? Nothing. I'm 15 years old and completely useless." "Now that's not entirely true," Thomas said. "You're 15 years old and learning. That's different from being useless. We all start from ignorance and arrogance. The question is whether we stay there." Marcus looked at the Duke. "Why are you being nice to me?" "I was horrible to you," Thomas smiled. "Because I see potential in you, Marcus. Yes, you behaved badly, but you're here now, aren't you? You could have written a quick apology and forgotten about it.
Instead, your father brought you here and you're actually listening and learning."
That takes a certain kind of courage." "It doesn't feel courageous," Marcus admitted. "It feels like the bare minimum." "Perhaps," Thomas agreed. "But the bare minimum is where change begins. I told your father that you reminded me of my nephew. When he was your age, he was quite similar. Entitled, arrogant, disrespectful. I could have written him off, but instead I invested time in him. Today he runs a nonprofit that helps disadvantaged youth. People can change, Marcus, if they choose to." A veteran approached them, a woman in her 40s with one arm. "Duke, sorry to interrupt, but we need your help with the heavy bags of soil." "Of course, Helen," Thomas said, standing. He looked at Marcus. "Would you like to help us?" "We could use strong young backs." Marcus stood immediately. "Yes, sir. I'd like that." For the next 3 hours, Marcus worked alongside veterans and a Duke, hauling soil, planting flowers, and listening to stories. He learned about sacrifice and service, about brotherhood and loss, about pain and resilience. His expensive clothes got dirty, his hands blistered. When the Chen family returned to their hotel that evening, Marcus was exhausted in a way he had never experienced before. It wasn't the fatigue from staying up late gaming or scrolling through social media. This was the tiredness that came from honest physical labor and emotional growth. His muscles ached, his hands were rough and sore, but his mind felt clearer than it had in years. He showered and changed, then sat on his bed staring at his cracked phone screen. His Instagram had hundreds of notifications, comments on old posts from followers wondering where he had gone. He scrolled through them briefly, reading the shallow comments and emoji reactions that had once meant everything to him. Now they felt empty and meaningless. Emily knocked and entered, finding her brother in an unusually contemplative mood. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," Marcus said. "Just thinking." "About today?" "About everything," Marcus replied. He set down his phone. When did I become such a jerk?" Emily sat beside him. "You weren't always like this. I remember when you were different. When you were 12, before Dad's company got really successful. You used to volunteer at the animal shelter. You loved helping those dogs find homes." Marcus had forgotten about that. It seemed like a lifetime ago, before the money and the private schools and the constant pressure to maintain a certain image. "What happened to me?" he wondered aloud. "I think you got lost," Emily said simply. "Everyone kept telling you that you were special because of what you had. You started believing that what you owned was who you were." Her words hit Marcus with the force of truth. She was absolutely right. Somewhere along the way, he had confused having things with being something. He had built his identity on possessions and followers rather than character and actions. "I want to be better," Marcus said. "I don't know how, but I want to try." Emily hugged her brother, something she hadn't done in over a year. "Then you will be. I believe in you." That night, Marcus barely slept. He kept thinking about the veterans he had met, about David Harrison learning to walk again, about Michael Torres and his daughter. about Thomas Whitmore pruning roses in a memorial garden. These were people who had faced real challenges and real sacrifices. What had Marcus ever faced? What had he ever overcome? The next morning, a hotel staff member knocked on their suite door with a message. An envelope had been delivered for Marcus Chen. The paper was heavy and expensive, with an embossed seal in the corner. Marcus opened it with trembling hands. The letter was from Thomas Whitmore. It read, "Dear Marcus, thank you for your apology letter and for your work in the garden yesterday. I could see in your eyes that something had shifted, and I wanted to extend an invitation. Next week there will be a ceremony at Wellington Barracks where several guards, including James Sullivan, will be recognized for their years of service. I thought you might like to attend as my guest. It would give you an opportunity to deliver your apology to Mr. Sullivan in person, and to see the honor and tradition that goes into the service you witnessed at Buckingham Palace. The choice is yours. Thomas Whitmore." Marcus read the letter 3 times, his heart pounding. The Duke was giving him a chance to make things right, to truly apologize face to face with the guard he had disrespected. It was terrifying and necessary. He showed the letter to his parents at breakfast. Richard read it carefully, then looked at his son with something that might have been pride. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go," Marcus said without hesitation. "I need to go." Linda touched her son's hand. "Then we'll make sure you're there." The week passed slowly. Marcus spent his days reading about military history and watching documentaries about the Royal Guards. He learned that the position was not ceremonial as he had assumed, but that these were elite soldiers who had served in combat zones around the world. The guards at Buckingham Palace had fought in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other conflict areas. They were warriors who happened to also perform ceremonial duties, not actors playing dress-up. He also learned about the selection process to become a guard. The physical standards were incredibly demanding. The mental discipline required was even more challenging. These men and women trained for months, learning to stand perfectly still for hours in all weather conditions, to ignore distractions and provocations, to represent their country with unwavering professionalism. Marcus felt ashamed all over again when he realized the depth of accomplishment he had mocked. Emily noticed her brother's dedication to learning. "You're really taking this seriously," she observed. "I have to," Marcus replied. "I can't just say I'm sorry and move on. I need to understand what I didn't respect." Richard also noticed the change in his son. One evening, as they walked along the Thames, he spoke honestly with Marcus. "I owe you an apology too," Richard said, surprising his son. "What do you mean?" "I gave you everything except boundaries," Richard explained. "I worked so hard to build wealth so my children would never struggle as I did. But in doing so, I forgot to teach you the values that helped me succeed. Humility, hard work, respect for others. I thought money would make you happy. Instead, it made you hollow." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "I don't want to be hollow anymore, Dad." "Then we'll work on that together," Richard promised. "Both of us need to do better." The day of the ceremony arrived gray and overcast, typical London weather. Marcus dressed carefully in the suit his father had bought him for the occasion. He wore a simple tie, nothing flashy or expensive looking. He wanted to show respect, not wealth. Thomas Whitmore's driver collected the Chen family from their hotel and drove them to Wellington Barracks, the home of the Guards Division. The building was stately and historic, with centuries of military tradition embedded in its walls. Other guests were arriving, mostly family members of the Guards being honored, all dressed formally and speaking in hushed, respectful tones. Thomas met them at the entrance, dressed in his own military uniform from his service days, decorated with medals and insignia. He looked every inch the Duke and military officer he was. "Marcus family, welcome," he greeted them warmly. "Come, let me show you to our seats." The ceremony room was elegant and formal, with portraits of monarchs and military heroes lining the walls. Marcus sat between his father and the Duke, feeling the weight of the occasion. This was not entertainment or content for social media. This was real life, real honor, real meaning. A military band played as the guards marched in, their movements synchronized with precision that came from countless hours of practice. Each wore their dress uniform, and Marcus could see the pride in their bearing. These were men and women who had earned their place here through sacrifice and service. A senior officer gave a speech about duty, honor, and the long tradition of the Guards. He spoke of the battles they had fought, the challenges they had overcome, and the exemplary service they provided. Then, one by one, guards were called forward to receive commendations and recognition. When James Sullivan's name was called, Marcus's heart clenched. The guard marched forward with perfect posture, his face composed and professional. The officer read a list of Sullivan's accomplishments, including 2 tours in Afghanistan where he had shown exceptional bravery under fire, saving 3 of his unit members during an ambush. He had been awarded medals for valor and had chosen to continue serving by becoming a Royal Guard. Marcus watched, stunned. This man he had mocked, whose profession he had dismissed as meaningless, was a genuine hero. He had saved lives. He had put himself in danger for others. And Marcus had treated him like a prop for a video. After the ceremony, there was a reception where families could meet with the honored guards. Marcus's hands were sweating as Thomas led him across the room to where James Sullivan stood speaking with his elderly parents and younger brother. "Mr. Sullivan," Thomas said formally, "may I introduce Marcus Chen and his family?" James turned, and for a moment Marcus saw recognition in his eyes. The guard knew exactly who he was. Marcus expected anger or coldness, but instead James simply nodded politely. "Mr. Sullivan," Marcus began, his voice shaking slightly, "I owe you an enormous apology. What I did at Buckingham Palace was inexcusable. I treated you with disrespect and cruelty when you were simply doing your duty. I didn't understand what that duty meant or what you had sacrificed to be there. I wrote you a letter, but I wanted to apologize in person as well. I'm deeply sorry for my behavior." James studied Marcus for a long moment. His parents and brother watched silently. Finally, James extended his hand. "Apology accepted, young man. Takes courage to own up to mistakes." Marcus shook his hand, feeling the firm grip of a soldier. "Thank you, sir. And congratulations on your commendations. What you did in Afghanistan saving those men, that's real heroism." "Just did my job," James said simply, though a small smile played at his lips. "But I appreciate the recognition." James's younger brother, who looked about Marcus's age, spoke up. "You're the kid from the video, aren't you? My friends have been sharing it online." Marcus's stomach dropped. "There's a video? Someone in the crowd filmed it," the brother explained. "It's been going around. You're kind of famous, mate, but not in a good way." James shot his brother a warning look, but Marcus shook his head. "No, it's okay. I deserve whatever criticism comes from that. I earned it." James's mother, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, patted Marcu. The mention of the viral video haunted Marcus for the rest of the reception. He tried to focus on the conversations around him, to appreciate the ceremony he had witnessed, but his mind kept returning to the fact that his worst moment had been captured and shared with thousands, maybe millions of people. He was famous now, but for all the wrong reasons. That evening, back at the hotel, Marcus finally built up the courage to search for the video. He found it easily. Multiple versions had been uploaded to different platforms with titles like "Entitled American Teen Harasses Royal Guard" and "Spoiled Rich Kid Gets Reality Check." The view counts were staggering. The original upload had over 5 million views. The comments were brutal. "This kid represents everything wrong with his generation. Someone needs to teach this brat some manners. The guard showed more patience than this kid deserved. Hope. His parents are proud of raising such a disrespectful person." Marcus read comment after comment, each one a knife to his pride. But the worst part was that they were right. Every criticism was justified. He had been exactly what they said he was: entitled, disrespectful, arrogant, and cruel. Emily found him staring at his cracked phone screen, tears running down his face. "Marcus? They're right," he whispered. "All of them. Look at what I did. Look at who I was." Emily sat beside him and looked at the video. Watching her brother's behavior captured on film was even worse than experiencing it in person. The mockery in his voice, the deliberate cruelty of dropping food near the guard's boots, the dismissive way he treated Thomas Whitmore. It was painful to watch. "Who I was," Emily repeated, emphasizing the past tense. "That's not who you are now." "How do you know?" Marcus asked. "How do you know I've actually changed and this isn't just temporary guilt?" "Because I'm your sister," Emily said. "I've known you your whole life. I can see the difference. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Marcus looked at the video again, at the millions of views and thousands of comments. An idea began forming in his mind. It was terrifying, and it would mean making himself vulnerable to millions of people. But maybe that was exactly what he needed to do. "I want to make a response video," Marcus said slowly, not defending myself or making excuses. "A real apology. To the guard, to the Duke, to everyone who saw what I did." Emily looked uncertain. "Are you sure? The internet can be cruel. People might not believe you're sincere." "I don't care if they believe me," Marcus replied, surprising himself with the truth of his words. "I need to do it anyway. Not for my reputation or my image, for me. Because it's the right thing to do." He discussed the idea with his parents the next morning. Linda was hesitant, worried about exposing Marcus to more criticism and potential harassment. But Richard understood his son's need to make a public accounting of his actions. "If you're going to do this," Richard said, "do it properly. Be honest. Don't perform for the camera. Just tell the truth." Marcus spent the entire day preparing. He wrote notes, crossed them out, and wrote again. He didn't want a scripted speech that sounded fake. He needed to speak from his heart. Finally, as the sun set over London, he set up his phone and pressed record. The video was 10 minutes long. Marcus appeared without fancy editing or music, just him sitting in his hotel room speaking directly to the camera. His cracked phone screen was visible in the reflection behind him, a reminder of the consequences of his actions. "My name is Marcus Chen," he began, "and I'm the kid from the viral video at Buckingham Palace. The one who harassed a royal guard and disrespected a stranger who tried to talk to me. I've seen the comments. I've read what people think of me, and you're all right." He paused, gathering courage to continue. "I was arrogant. I was cruel. I treated another human being like he was an object for my entertainment. That guard, James Sullivan, is a decorated war hero who saved lives in Afghanistan, and I mocked him. I dropped food near his boots. I tried to make him break his professional composure for my social media content. It's shameful." Marcus's voice cracked slightly, but he pushed forward. "The man I called old man and told to mind his own business was the Duke of Lancaster, Thomas Whitmore, a member of the British royal family and a military veteran himself. He spoke to me with kindness and wisdom, and I repaid him with rudeness and disrespect. I'm ashamed of how I behaved." He described his week in London, the visit to the rehabilitation center, meeting veterans who had sacrificed so much. He talked about attending the ceremony and apologizing to James Sullivan in person. He spoke about his parents cutting his allowance and taking away his phone privileges. "I'm not sharing this to get sympathy or to make myself look better," Marcus said. "I'm sharing it because I think maybe there are other kids like me out there who need to hear this. Kids who have been given a lot and appreciate nothing. Kids who think respect is something you only show to people who can benefit you." He looked directly into the camera. "Money doesn't make you better than anyone else. Followers don't make you important. Expensive clothes don't give you character. I had all of those things and I was empty inside. I was so focused on being seen, on being envied, that I forgot to be human. I forgot that the measure of a person isn't what they have but what they give." Marcus explained that he would be donating his remaining allowance for the year to military charities. He announced that he was deleting all his social media accounts except one, which he would only use to promote causes and charities rather than himself. He was giving up his expensive possessions and asking his parents to help him find ways to serve others. "I can't undo what I did," Marcus concluded. "That video will exist forever. My actions are permanent, but my character doesn't have to be. I can change. I can grow. I can become someone worthy of the privileges I've been given. To James Sullivan, to Thomas Whitmore, to my family, and to everyone who witnessed my behavior, I am truly and deeply sorry, and I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm better than that worst moment." He ended the recording and sat in silence for several minutes before uploading it. His hand hovered over the post button. Once he pressed it, there would be no taking it back. He would be exposing himself to millions of people, opening himself to mockery and doubt. But he pressed post anyway. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the video had hundreds of thousands of views. The comment section was a battlefield of opinions. Some people praised his courage and honesty. Others accused him of performing for sympathy. Some said he was only apologizing because he got caught. Others believed he was genuinely trying to change. Thomas Whitmore called that evening. "I saw your video, Marcus. That took real courage." "Some people think I'm faking it," Marcus admitted. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just performing again." "Perhaps," Thomas said. "But I don't think so. Performative apologies are carefully crafted and defensive. Yours was raw and honest. You didn't make excuses. You didn't ask for forgiveness. You simply acknowledged your failures and committed to change. That's not performance. That's accountability. James Sullivan also reached out through a message that Thomas forwarded. Respect for owning your mistakes publicly. That's harder than standing still for 2 hours in the rain. Good on you, mate. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from David Harrison, the young veteran Marcus had met at the rehabilitation center. David had watched the video and sent a message through the facility's director. Losing my leg taught me that who we are isn't fixed. We're all constantly becoming something new. Every day is a choice about who we want to be. You're choosing to be better. That's all any of us can do. Keep going. Marcus read that message over and over. David had lost his leg serving others, and he was encouraging Marcus, who had never sacrificed anything. It felt undeserved, but maybe that was the point. Grace was often undeserved. Second chances were gifts, not rights. The video continued to spread over the following days. News outlets picked up the story. Some framed it as viral teen makes apology video, while others questioned whether public apologies were genuine or just damage control. Marcus tried to ignore the media circus and focus on the changes he had committed to making. He deleted his Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat accounts, keeping only a basic Twitter account that he renamed to focus on charity promotion rather than self-promotion. He made his first donation to the military charity that supported Headley Court. He researched volunteer opportunities in his hometown back in California. But there was still one more thing he needed to do. Something that scared him more than making that video. Something that would test whether his change was real or just temporary emotion. He needed to maintain this transformation when he returned home, away from the immediate consequences of his actions. He needed to prove that he could be better not because people were watching, but because it was who he wanted to be. The true test was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the incident at Buckingham Palace. Marcus sat in the community center in a modest neighborhood of San Jose, helping a 12-year-old boy named Miguel with his math homework. The room was filled with the sounds of children reading, playing, and learning. It was a far cry from the luxury Marcus had once considered normal, and it was exactly where he needed to be. Returning home to California had been harder than Marcus expected. His friends from his expensive private school had seen the viral videos, both the original and his apology. Their reactions were mixed. Some thought his apology was fake, a calculated move to save his reputation. Others were impressed by his honesty, but skeptical about whether the change would last. A few, his closest friends, simply stopped talking to him altogether. The hardest part was facing himself in familiar surroundings. In London, with the shame fresh and the consequences immediate, change had felt urgent and necessary. But back home, in his comfortable bedroom with all his possessions, it would have been easy to slip back into old patterns. The temptation to re-download his apps, to buy the latest expensive items, to fall back into his previous lifestyle was constant. Marcus's parents had kept their word about consequences. His allowance remained cut in half, with the other half going to various military charities. His new phone was basic, capable of calls and texts but without social media apps or endless internet scrolling. He had donated most of his expensive clothing to charity, keeping only what he needed. His designer sneaker collection, once his pride and joy, had been sold with the proceeds going to veterans organizations. But the most significant change wasn't external. It was the way Marcus thought about himself and others. He had enrolled in a public school instead of returning to his private academy, wanting to be around people from different backgrounds and economic situations. He volunteered at the community center 3 times a week, tutoring kids who couldn't afford private help. He had joined a local program that paired teens with elderly veterans, spending time listening to their stories and helping with chores. Miguel, the boy he was currently helping, reminded Marcus of who he used to be in some ways. Miguel was smart and capable, but sometimes arrogant about it, dismissive of kids he thought weren't as clever. Marcus saw an opportunity to guide someone before they went down the same path he had. "You got this one wrong," Marcus said, pointing to a problem on Miguel's worksheet. "Want to try again?" "I didn't get it wrong," Miguel insisted. "The answer key is wrong," Marcus smiled patiently. "Let's check together. Walk me through your process." As Miguel explained his reasoning, Marcus could see where the mistake had happened. But instead of pointing it out immediately, he asked questions that led Miguel to discover the error himself. When Miguel finally saw his mistake, his face flushed with embarrassment. "It's okay to be wrong sometimes," Marcus said gently. "I used to think admitting mistakes made me weak. Turns out it's actually the opposite. It takes strength to say I was wrong and learn from it." Miguel looked at Marcus with new respect. "Is it true what they say about you? That you're the kid from those videos?" Marcus had known this conversation would come eventually. "Yeah, that's me." "Which one?" Miguel asked. "The mean one or the sorry one?" "Both," Marcus answered honestly. "I was the person in the first video doing something terrible. Then I became the person in the second video, trying to be better. I'm still trying every day." "Some kids at school say you only apologize because you got in trouble," Miguel said, testing him. "They might be right," Marcus admitted. "Maybe I wouldn't have changed if I hadn't faced consequences. But does it matter why I started changing if the change is real? I'm not that person anymore because I don't want to be, not because I have to pretend." Miguel thought about this, then returned to his math with renewed focus. Marcus watched him work, feeling a sense of purpose he had never experienced while chasing social media fame. After the tutoring session ended, Marcus walked outside to find his father waiting in the parking lot. Richard had scaled back his work hours slightly, wanting to spend more time with his children and model the work-life balance he had always preached, but never practiced. "How was today?" Richard asked as Marcus got in the car. "Good," Marcus replied. "Miguel is really smart. Reminds me of myself, actually. The old myself. I'm trying to help him not make the same mistakes." Richard smiled. "You're doing good work, son. I'm proud of you." Those words, which Marcus had heard countless times before regarding grades or achievements, now carried a different weight. His father wasn't proud of what he had accomplished or acquired. He was proud of who he was becoming. They drove to the veterans' home where Marcus had been volunteering. His regular visit was with a 78-year-old Korean War veteran named Frank Chen, who insisted they had to be related despite different family backgrounds. Frank had lost both legs in combat and spent the last 20 years in the care facility. He was sharp, funny, and brutally honest. "You're late," Frank said when Marcus arrived at his room. "I was about to start the movie without you." "Sorry, Frank, traffic was bad." Marcus helped Frank into his wheelchair and set up the DVD player. They had been working through classic war films together, with Frank providing commentary about what Hollywood got right and wrong. Today's film was Saving Private Ryan. As they watched, Frank occasionally paused the movie to explain tactical details or share memories from his own service. When they reached the final cemetery scene, Frank was quiet for a long moment. "That line," Frank said softly. "Earn this, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Those men died so others could live. The question is, do the people who benefited from that sacrifice earn it? Do they live lives worthy of the gift they were given?" Marcus thought about his own life. He hadn't sacrificed anything, but others had sacrificed so he could have the freedom and opportunities he enjoyed. His grandfather had fought in Vietnam. The guards he had mocked had served in dangerous places. Countless men and women had given their lives throughout history so that he could sit in a comfortable home, safe and free. "I don't know if I'm earning it," Marcus said honestly, "but I'm trying." "That's all anyone can do," Frank replied. "Try, keep trying. Never stop trying. The moment you think you've arrived, that you've earned enough, is the moment you stop growing." After leaving the veterans' home, Marcus received a text from Emily. His sister had become one of his strongest supporters and occasional critics, quick to call him out if she saw him slipping into old behaviors. "Heads up," her text read. "Someone at school tomorrow is supposedly planning to confront you about the video. Wants to make a scene." Marcus's stomach tightened. The videos had followed him even to his new school. Most students ignored him or treated him normally, but some saw him as a target or a chance for their own viral moment. He could skip school, avoid the confrontation, but that would be running away. He texted back, "Thanks for the warning. I'll handle it." The next day at school, Marcus was approached during lunch by a senior named Derek, who was well known for his social media presence and his confrontational style. Derek was filming on his phone as he approached, clearly intending to capture whatever happened next. "So you're the famous Marcus Chen," Derek said loudly, drawing attention from nearby students. "The guy who thinks he can just apologize and everything is fine." How does it feel to be internet famous for being a terrible person? Marcus could feel dozens of eyes on him. His old instinct was to get defensive, to lash out, to protect his ego. But he had learned something in the past 3 months. He didn't have to prove anything to Derek or to the students watching. He only had to be true to who he was now. It feels awful, Marcus answered calmly. It feels like exactly what I deserve. I did something terrible and it's documented forever. I can't change that. Derek seemed thrown off by the honest answer. So you admit you're just a spoiled rich kid who thinks he's better than everyone? I was, Marcus corrected. Past tense. I thought money and status made me important. I was wrong about a lot of things. And now you expect us to believe you've changed? Derek pressed, his camera still recording. That you're some kind of reformed person? How convenient, Marcus shrugged. I don't expect anything from you. Believe me or don't. Judge me by how I act now, not by what I say. Watch me for the next 4 years. If I'm faking it, you'll be able to tell. So this is all real? Derek asked skeptically. The volunteering, the donations, the whole humble act? It's not an act, Marcus said. And it's not about being humble. It's about being honest. I'm not a hero. I'm not even a particularly good person yet. I'm just someone who realized I was heading in the wrong direction and decided to change course. That's all? Derek lowered his phone slightly, looking genuinely curious now rather than confrontational. Why should anyone care about your redemption story? Why should we give you a second chance? You shouldn't, Marcus replied. Second chances aren't owed. They're gifts. If people want to judge me by my worst moment forever, that's fair. That moment was real. It happened. But I'm going to keep trying to be better anyway, whether people believe in me or not. The lunch period ended and students began dispersing. Derek stood there for a moment, then turned off his camera without posting the video. You know what? He said. That was Act 2.